Hi, Richard Tang, CEO of Zen Internet, here on the Freedom Fibre stand at Connected Britain with Darren Woods, the CFO of Freedom Fibre. Darren, hello.
Oh yeah, nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. I've just presented my full Fibre Wacky Races 6, and one of the things I presented in there was Clive Selley's view that he's perplexed by alternate economics. And one of the things he said is that he said the revenue in some cases is not even covering the interest payments. So as a finance person in alternate world, what is your view and I guess your response to Clive? Clive saying revenue not covering interest payments, that's not a sustainable business. He's perplexed.
It's not surprising that Clive, from a monopoly point of view, is surprised that there's competition and doesn't really want to see more competition, is it? I suspect if we went back years and asked British Airways what they thought about Ryanair and EasyJet, they'd struggle to understand the economics. But if you look where we are today, we've got a far more competitive landscape because the disruptors in the marketplace have entered. And again, not surprisingly, when you've got businesses that are in startup phase, so the alternate sector's only really been going for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And it's not surprising that at the early stages of these businesses, they're loss-making and require capital. If you're never going to invest in new products or new sectors or new markets, and you assume you're going to make money from day one, then you're never going to make progress, are you?
Yeah, and look, I don't think there's any business on the planet where you can make profit from day one. Well,
exactly.
Very few. There's very few businesses, and I remember when I set up Zen in 1995. It wasn't until 1999 that we made any money at all, and that didn't have the same level of investment as the altnets. And look, on the free market competition, I think it's brilliant. I've said it's the best infrastructure free market competition that we've seen for 30 years. Absolutely brilliant. And as well as being brilliant for the market, it is actually, I think, very good for the incumbent themselves.
Yeah.
You've seen that Openreach has really accelerated its activities in the face of real competition. I think that's a really good thing all around. But I guess the question is, if we're still in that startup phase now, and the costs of these altnets are so high, and the revenue and the EBITDA is so low. I mean, if I thought if Zen had the level of revenue to interest payments that some of the altnets have, I'm not sure I could ever see that flipping round and becoming sustainable because it's so high. There's a big focus on EBITDA, and as Warren Buffett is famed to say, well, who pays for the capex, the tooth fairy? Yeah. So, I mean, but I'm not a finance person.
Well, it did. Look, you're absolutely right. Nobody would choose to have a position where interest payments are higher than sales or EBITDA, yeah? But it is a factor of an emerging market. And we have a lot of investors. I think the amount of investment that's come in from private investment into this sector in the last 5 years is unprecedented.
Yes.
Yeah? And those investors understand that this is a long-term investment. Now, of course, every business has got plans, and those plans get revised and changed because the market around us keeps changing. Yeah. I mean, it would be wonderful if we had a crystal ball and said, we put a plan in place and that's just going to be how it is. I think you've got a lot of investors in the marketplace that understand this is a long-term investment. And we started Freedom Fibre 5 years ago. We have a 30-year contract with PXC, right? Now, 30-year contract underlines the fact that it's a long-term commitment, yeah? And, fibre networks are expected to be around for at least 30, if not 50 years.
Yes.
So I think you've got to put it in context. That doesn't mean that there aren't short-term goals that every business has to try and achieve. And equally, it doesn't mean that you don't have to navigate the challenges of the capital markets. Let's not forget when altnet started, capital was cheap.
Yes.
And interest rates have shifted significantly. And as a result of which, markets have made it much more challenging for altnets and investors. So what you've seen is businesses have to react to that. If the interest rates have gone up really high, you've got to start to generate more revenue quicker. And that's what you're seeing with the altnets. They're trying to find creative ways to generate that revenue and get to profitability. And a big part of it is the problem from higher interest payments and higher debt. Yeah. And the other final point I'd make is that I think government has been fantastic in providing some funding into the sector, but it sets up the UK Infra Bank and then the National Wealth Fund in order to help those businesses to build infrastructure. And it's not been great at that. It's been okay, but it kind of stopped putting more money into the altnet sector because it couldn't quite see where it was going. So I think private investors have ridden a pretty choppy storm, actually, and I think are doing a pretty good job in what is a very difficult environment.
So is this a call for government to do better in terms of
I think there's a call for
promoting
government
that
to be a bit more
competition?
joined up. I
Right.
don't think BDUK and the National Wealth Fund are joined up, for instance. Yeah, if you take the simple example of gigabit contracts, I think it's great that they're issued across a wide variety of altnets. I don't understand why they're just not naturally underwritten by the National Wealth Fund, because it's a government contract effectively. So
Yeah.
why is there any debate about that? And that would take the pressure off some private investors, and it would take a more long-term view of landing these projects that everybody wants to be delivered. What you've seen is, including Freedom Fibre, we've handed some of the projects back because the burden of capital and the way the markets have moved is just too much for the business to bear. And yet it's to the detriment of the country overall. Well, we all want these networks building, gigabit contracts being built.
Yeah. And let's talk about the business model, because you said it's a long-term business model.
Yeah.
You've got a 30-year deal with PXC. And I remember that I looked at one of the business plans from one of the early altnets. This is back in 2015. You might be able to guess who it was. And that was a 20-year business case. So I guess is that the sort of time scale that Freedom Fibre and other altnets are working to?
No, I think we have, as you'd expect, and every altnet will have this, you've got long-term business plans because it's an infrastructure project, basically. You know, if you looked at any infrastructure project, they would have more than a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
Right? Now, how long it takes you to get to cash positive, which is what everybody wants to get to. EBITDA positive is great because your operating cash is covering your costs, and that's great. But actually, you want to get to cash positive. And what I think's happened in the last few years is that where it may have been a kind of 8 or 9 year plan to get to cash positive, I think altnets are under pressure to make that more like 5 or 6 years or in the next couple of years. And you'll have heard today and through the conference that a lot are saying we'll get to cash positive next year or next spring or next summer. And that's now becoming a common theme. And that's basically, I think the altnet's having to react to, as we discussed before, all the different challenges on how difficult it is to secure capital in the markets, and also trying to give investors confidence that there is a way forward. They don't just have to keep putting their hands in the pocket.
Yeah, and one of the things I've presented in Full Fibre Wacky Races 6, which you'll be able to check out on my YouTube channel at some point, is this feedback that actually some of the big guys are bluffing in the poker game because all they can do is this cashless mergers, and the opinion was that doesn't actually strengthen their hand that much. What's your view on that?
Well, I think the analogy to poker is a very good point, but I think that's any business. You know, you've got in any sector you pick, everybody's trying to outmaneuver everybody else, and they've all got a different set of cards they're trying to play. Yeah, I saw the debate yesterday about is a wholesale or retail going to be the end winner in this particular sector. So we've all got different views on which cards are the best cards to play. I think ultimately it depends on where you see the market moving. And I think everybody accepts that the market needs to consolidate because that then presents a much stronger position against the largely dominant incumbent, which is Openreach.
Yeah.
So having 100 fragmented altnets in the long term isn't a sustainable solution. I think you'll find most altnets have accepted that's the case, and most investors. How those actually then play out into where we end up is the interesting debate.
Yeah.
Now, not surprisingly, you wouldn't want to be cashing out an investor that's started up an altnet and hasn't finished the job by somebody else coming in. So most of the deals are paper deals because it's really a way of committing both investors to continue the job to get to the end game. And I think that's a fair point.
Okay. And my last question, I don't know how much you can say about this, but in terms of Freedom Fibre and where Freedom Fibre fits into the consolidation journey, can you tell?
Well, we've always been very clear
about
that we want to. Neil's used to say, Neil, our founder, who's happily now in retirement mode, he's always said we wanted a seat at the table. And we always do want a seat at the table. We believe that we've always punched above our weight. We believe from day one, having a contract with PXC, And more latterly, we're fantastically delighted to have a contract with Zen, because we want to be a credible player in the marketplace, and we'll always want to be part of that consolidation play. And we feel as though we've got some very strong cards to play, and we'll be part of that in the next few years.
Yeah, fantastic, Darren. Thank you so much. Look, a big thanks to you and everyone in the Freedom Fibre team. We've got a great partnership. We're really starting to build up volume. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for watching.
Thank you.